Right now, we're gonna build a sample railing that meets code in every way. So we got your top rail. We got your 2 posts at 35/7/8 here. I already measured out and cut my balusters ahead of time. And since, like we said before, this is an 1 3/4 top rail, for that reason, we're using 5/8 balusters. And I got punched for 5/8, so that way they fit exactly inside. All right. On top of that, we got our base plates that we weld last on the post. And then we got our tabs that go on the ends. We start with the top rail. We mark off 3.5 inches on both ends, which I already have done, for the post. So that way, that's where we start from. So as you see, when we double check, we have 3.5 inches on this end, and you check on this side. So now, as you see, we have 3.5 inches on this side, post from the edge of the top rail. And we also got 3.5 inches exactly from the post to the edge of the top rail. So I'm gonna do bottom corner, go around bottom corner. Again, you got my gloves, helmet, you got all your protection on. Whenever you start tacking your post, you never ever tack on top, even though it seems simpler. But once you do your 2 tacks on top and only 1 tack again, it's hard to square it off because of your tack. Whenever you do an outside tack on both ends on each post, 1 single outside tack, it's easier to square it. Also, when I tack it, I do it from the outside. When I put the channel in between the posts, I can mark off my punched channel to match the top rail, which you'll see in a minute. So as right now, I have my marking for the 3.5. You set your post and make sure it's flushed all the way across, and you'll see a gap if it isn't. And you just do a single tack on one end. Again, double check that everything's at 3.5. Your post is flush with your top rail, and doing another outside tack. Now that you have your post tack, you measure the distance between them and you cut your channel. When you cut your channel, make sure you have the same distance from the balusters from each end. On this end, it came out to be 3/7/8, 3/7/8. The reason why I don't tack from the inside is that now I can put that channel inside my top rail, no weld is in the way, and I can mark it off with my Sharpie each baluster where it's supposed to be from the notches. And now you see all of my markings that are made. And now when I build it, I can make sure they match up exactly where. Also, when I'm finished marking them up, I draw an X, or some sort of marking, so that way as I'm handling the material, I don't accidentally turn it over and have a different spacing. So as you remember, the spacing from the bottom of the channel to the bottom of the base plate, even though we don't have it yet, it's supposed to be 2.5. The base plate is 1/4 inch. So we're gonna mark off 2.25 on both sides of the post. And we'll add the channel. Whenever you tack it, make sure you center that channel, center of the post, and you add a single tack. So now, when you double check, channel to the bottom of the post is 2.25, and if you add temporarily your base plate, and you measure to the bottom of it, you will have 2.5. So on all of our standard railings, we should have from channel to the bottom of the base plate, 2.5 inches. Now, going forward, what we're gonna do is clamp down the top rail, square it off, and then add another clamp to the post. 2 reasons why we clamp down the rail. First reason we clamp down the rail is so that we're able to square it, so it's not wobbling all over the place. Second, a lot of times these top rails are a little bit warped. And so we clamp it down, so as we're welding it, it's exactly perfectly straight. Whenever you clamp a top rail, you have your markings for your baluster. Just make sure you clamp it around it. So that way you're not moving your clamp over because it's in the way of the baluster. Here, again, there. Now your whole top is clamped and you can move the bottom half of this railing. Now the crucial part is to make sure that it's perfectly square. So that way when you're finished and you install it, it looks even with everything that's going on site. Now we want to square off the railing. Easy. Grab your tape, put it from the inside corner, and you measure from outside corner. Right now I have exactly at 4 feet. Do the same exact thing. Bring it in. And here I have 47 and 5/8, basically 3/8 off. So all you have to do is move over one side. So I set it up at 47, 13, 16. Go on this side, 47, 13, 16. So now they're both exactly square. So in this case, to make sure everything stays put, grab your clamp and clamp down the bottom. Now as you're working, your bottom half isn't moving. Now comes the balusters. When you measure your balusters, make sure you measure from the inside. With this top rail has the ridges, and make sure you don't measure from the ridge. And you measure halfway to the channel. So here I have about 33 and a half, and I already cut all my balusters at 33 and a half. The reason why we put that channel up to put those markings, why? When you put your baluster, it fits exactly where it's supposed to be, and that way you don't have to mark each one individually. Now, there are certain times when you don't have these markings because you built the rail on site, it rained. What you do in that case, you measure from outside in. For an example, if the bottom side is 8/3, we put this one at 8/3. I'm measuring this one right now. And the same with this one. I have it at 8/3, double check the bottom, 8/3. So I can tack these two individually and measure everything else in between to make sure everything's exact. If you start to measure from one side going in, sometimes if one becomes off, the rest of them will be off. So always start with one baluster closer to the post, make it parallel, and then the rest, just make sure they're good in between. Now that I have my markings, bring up your baluster halfway so it's center of the top rail. And I do a tack on the side because I'm going to be welding horizontally. And so when I do a vertical tack on that end, that way it's not in the way of the weld. After you have tacked your balusters on top, go down and double check the channel. The reason why is sometimes that channel, when it gets punched, it gets warped. And sometimes it's pretty good and sometimes it's bad. So before you weld the bottom, double check so it's straight. Because if it isn't right now, this is the moment when you can fixate it because it has some room to play. When everything's good, you can weld all your balusters. The biggest thing, do not weld through. Do not weld any holes through the channel popping through. There's nothing worse because those are the ones that are really hard to fix. So as you start welding, weld one side, going top down, and quick welds. So as you can see, I made my tack on the side, but my welds are going to be horizontal. And as you see, as I weld a horizontal and I go around that corner about 1/4 inch and go down. And you can see it's a fully penetrated weld. There is no cracks. I did not weld just the top rail or just the baluster because a lot of times guys will weld a baluster or a top rail, and when we drop it off to the powder coat, it breaks off, in which we have to go back, re-weld it, and start all over again. Typically, I first fully weld the balusters, top, bottom, and after that, I go to post and welding that channel. Very basic. The wider top rail, the 2 1/4, we only weld 2 sides. The small one, 1 3/4, we weld all 4 sides because it's flush with the post. Once the rail is welded, you have the post welded, your balusters are welded, your channels are welded, you can weld now your tabs. Make sure you don't do the tab after you finish the railing, after you get it clean, and then do the tab. A lot of guys do that, where they finish the railing, they clean it, right before we shake it to the powder coat, they realize they forgot the tabs. Typically, the second I finish welding everything up, I add the tab and then I add the base plate. Tabs are very basic. You put them flush to the top rail, you weld it properly, and that's it. Make sure it's centered and it's straight. Right now, typically, we don't just tack it and then weld it. I just tack and weld right away. So this is just to show you guys. It's flush with that top rail, it is straight, and it is 90 degree. Sometimes what I'll do, I'll bend it out a little bit, and the reason why, as you throw that weld on, the heat will pull it back and it'll make it a perfect 90. Now, as you can see, everything is 90. A full weld that is melted both to the tab and the top rail. If it is welded on properly, your tab should never break, ever. If it breaks off of that top rail. But a lot of guys, they'll throw a really quick pass because they're in a hurry, and before you know it, during the process when we're dropping off to the powder coat or as we're handling, they break off, in which we have to re-weld and waste time again. Before you weld your base plate, mark it off. A lot of guys, they'll do a full markup, meaning they'll mark all 4 sides, they'll put it up, they'll weld it. Whenever we go to install, everything's crooked. The reason why is a lot of times you don't notice as you weld the post, it twists a little bit. And so when you make your base plate to match the post and you look up from the top down, your base plate looks crooked. So what I do is I mark off on the base plate where the post is supposed to be on one corner. I set it up, I tack it, and then I double check that this is flush with the top rail. For an example, here, after you did your one tack, you eyeball with the top of your base plate to match with the top of your top rail. So that way they're parallel. In this case, as I look down, I can see that it's a little bit twisted. And now it's perfectly even. Again, you don't want to make it perfect with the post, because if the post is a little crooked, your base plates will be as well. In this case, I push that base plate against the bottom and I add another tack on the bottom. Now that you got 2 sides that are tacked, you can now weld 1 full pass, and then whenever you finish your other base plate, you can flip it over and weld the other side as well. Do not just weld 1 full side without the other side being tacked. The reason why is it's gonna warp it up, and you're gonna have a large gap in which you're gonna be beating that base plate to be able to straighten it out.